So, Aki Cederberg, thanks for joining us. So, you are the author of Journeys Through the Kali Yuga, and we actually spoke about that a few years ago. And I know we tentatively plan to talk about your following book, which is now released, Holy Europe. So, yeah, perhaps you could just talk a little bit about who you are and what is Holy Europe and why.
Yes, I am Aki Cederberg. I'm a Finnish author, I guess. That's what I've been mostly channeling my creative energy to in the last years. I also conduct these Finnic rites, meaning like these kind of exoteric, I guess, rites of passage and of the sort of calendar rites according to the Finnic tradition, which I consider to be important for many reasons. You have to sort of uphold the local spiritual tradition of your culture, and give it new form.
Yeah.
But yes, I Journeys in the Kali Yuga was my sort of a delving into the Indian tradition of the Naga Babas. And I did it because as a European, I found it frustrating and difficult uh, to try to connect with these streams of pre-Christian tradition, which aren't alive in the same sense as the Indian traditions are, meaning
Yeah.
that you have living lines of authority and you have sort of a living corpus of teachers and students and so forth, like a
Yeah.
chain and a living line of this tradition. So
Yeah.
I was always attracted to the pre-Christian traditions of Europe before and delved into those from a very young age. But there was a sense of disconnection uh, when I couldn't find like the living
Yeah.
thing. Like when I was
Yeah.
very young, I think we talked. I don't remember if we talked about this with you, but I lived for a time in England as a part of this heathen
Yeah,
brotherhood.
we did discuss this. Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
Yeah,
So I mean that's that was I was 18 years old then,
yeah,
and just meeting people. This was like sort of there wasn't a lot of internet stuff
yeah.
yet, so it was pretty like you'd have to correspond with people with actual letters and things to get to know people. And so I quickly realized, or got to when you actually meet people, then it's like they've just made this thing up or
Yeah, yeah,
read some books or
yeah,
and they're applying it, which is, fine, but it's
yeah.
not really the living
Right.
spiritual tradition in the sense that it's like unbroken.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
went to India to sort of see what that would be like, a living tradition in the modern world,
yeah.
and sort of found the closest approximate to my own sort of path in India, which
Mm,
was a Shaivite, a Shiva tradition, and then delved into that, and then at the end of that realized that this isn't really unless I sort of I'm adopted into Indian society and
yeah,
I kind of cut ties with my own family and my tribe and my own culture. I can't
right.
really enter further into this, uh, and so I returned to my own native soil in a larger sense, Europe, and then I tried to sort of use the knowledge and the experience that I had to look at Europe in this sort of same way. And
Right.
so Holy Europe is that. That's my sort of trying to find what is the whole. You asked what is Holy Europe? Well, that is what I was looking for in this book,
Yeah.
and it is the sort of transcendent core and mythopoetic story at the root of Europe. It's like the spiritual
Yeah.
center,
Hmm.
and it's neither pagan only or Christian only. It's a tension of those two streams, really, which forms Holy Europe. So it's
Right.
this sort of transcendent reality uh, in the middle of, in the center of Europe. And where this manifests is in the sacred sites of Europe,
Hmm.
in the physical locations and places where this transcendent reality is somehow more accessible
Yeah.
to people. So people can touch it, because this has always been my thing is that you have to go to touching distance of the thing that you want to know.
Right.
It's very difficult to have secondhand, be invigorated by secondhand knowledge only, and only
Yes.
books and things. You have to have a sort of living connection and experience of that thing, be it a person or a place or a tradition.
Yeah.
And so this is me traveling to these places throughout Europe. Some of them, many of maybe majority of them are pagan places,
Hmm.
pre-Christian places, but also Christian places and places where these two things sort of meet or cross, and then modern temples and temples of art, which I also think is a manifestation of the divine
Yeah.
spirit,
Yeah.
definitely, or maybe the most central manifestations of that. So there's a lot of artists' sort of shrines that I go to. And
Hmm.
I'm trying to look for that central thing, what the Holy Europe really, what that means, and what it means nowadays, because I think Europeans have become a very dispossessed people. They sort of lost their collective soul, like in
Hmm.
this way that the person you can lose um, as a consequence of some traumatic event. You might,
Yeah.
in these shamanic traditions, they talk of soul loss or something like that.
Right.
You can kind of lose a part of yourself, or maybe
Yeah.
a part of your soul gets stuck in the underworld and is traveling there.
Right.
And I think that Europeans have lost a part of their soul, or a part of their soul is like dormant or it's underground. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was trying to find that thing which is lost, and
Right.
for myself, of course, and try to orient myself and the story towards what that center and where that soul could sort of come into blooming again.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
it's also it's a picture of the times. I mean, I am not writing about these things in a vacuum. Like I'm not ignorant of what's happening in Europe when I go to places
Mm.
and what I see. You cannot be honest about these things and just be like, yeah, I'm just writing about historical places and prehistoric places and ruins. And
Yeah.
you have to also see what the reality of those cultures and places are in this day and age.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it has this sort of a little bit angsty uh,
Right.
undertone, maybe, because there is this kind of
On
like
some pages,
nervous.
yeah.
Yes. So there's kind of a,
Mostly not, but in a few pages, yeah.
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 And but that's the spirit of our age. That's the zeitgeist.
Yeah, that's right.
You
Yeah.
can't escape it. So
Yeah. Yeah, when I
so
when
yeah,
I
that's yeah, sorry.
yeah, so when I live in New York, obviously, and it's interesting. So a lot of people come here that, may, even into paganism or whatever, and they really like New York much more than I think they would. And I think there's still a lot of energy here, which is great. And I mean, it's not traditional at all. Of course, the energy is more like jazz. It's very frenetic and chaotic, and you turn a corner and you don't know what you're going to run into, whether it's good or bad or unique or unusual. But yeah, when I go to England, as I do about once a year, I do go to London, but I try and avoid it because it just feels something sort of empty there. It feels much more consumerist, in a way, but it's strange because, of course, the buildings are much older and there's more of there's a longer tradition there, obviously, a lot longer. But yeah, it feels very touristy, very commercial. I mean, it's nice. I have a good time, but it feels like there's a sort of emptiness there that people don't really know what
Yeah,
what they're
it's funny
living
you
for.
mentioned New York and this. I mean, I've recently just been really inspired and fascinated by these pictures. I think they're just from the 30s, 40s from New York, and just the Art Deco,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I love Art Deco
yeah,
and that style, and that, like, that's a very European sort of tradition of architecture where you sort of blend these forms from the past,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then there's this sort of futurist
Yeah, that's
way of
that's right.
simplifying and the form and stuff. And I
Yeah.
look at these. There's these dreamy images of women in evening gowns having like a martini at the top of some skyscraper, and it's all
Yeah.
black and white, and then it's like hazy in the distance, and it just looks like some dream
Yeah, that's
of some
right.
some like beautiful world, and it's so fascinating and like
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean when I speak of this paganism, I don't, as we've talked in the past, I'm not the a retro pagan,
Yeah,
and I'm not advocating for a return to any kind of historical forms, and I don't think that's the thing. But there, what is central in these things is what is beyond time, what is eternal,
yeah,
the
that's right.
eternal essence, not what is
Yeah,
historical or bound to some
yeah,
outer trapping of of culture that is past. So I
right.
think we can sort of manifest the pagan spirit in all
Mhm.
very modern ways, be it
Yeah,
in this kind of architecture or
yeah,
in poetry, which breaks the traditional. Like I write up in this book about Ezra Pound. He was the modernist poet,
mm,
that broke the form of the traditional poetry.
yeah,
Yet he based his the cantos begin with a retelling of the Homeric epic. It's like he's basing it on the ancient Greek myth,
yeah,
that the oldest Western literature really that there is. But
right.
he's giving it new form, like make it new, as he says. And I
Yeah,
think that's kind of what we have to do in a way. But
yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
also get the angst what you're talking about London. There's a strange situation in Europe. Like you go to these cities and they're kind of like you don't know where you are because they're all the same.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
There's the same shops, the same
yeah,
coffee houses, the same
yeah,
thing, the same problems in all of the European, at least Central European cities. It's like, oh well, you kind of like have this strange sense like, where am I? What is this place?
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
certainly not the Europe or the cities that make those places great, I
Yeah,
think.
that's right. No, yeah, I think it's a weird thing with North America and Europe, in that Europeans often want to be more, well, they sort of look down on America, but want to be more American at the same time. So they say, "Ugh, there's no culture there," but then they import, fast food joints and, Hollywood movies that are not necessarily very good. Whereas, Americans, up until recently, at least, I don't know if it's still the case, but it seems that Americans wanted to be more like Europeans. Well, even in left-wing politics, they always look to, Northern European nations as the model, or, reading Karl Marx or whatever. They're not
Mhm.
reading American philosophers or Chinese philosophers necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, as I said, like I think sometimes Americans can express something in these very sort of invigorated ways, like Ezra Pound. This is a prime example of it, where you can take something and you can
Yeah.
reform it in some sort of way where it gets new life.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely. Well, certainly a lot of American buildings have a lot of grandeur to them. Obviously, some of them are based on ancient Roman architecture, but then probably, you may be thinking of the Chrysler building, which is super modernist Art Deco, but it has those enormous gargoyles on them. They really are absolutely enormous. They, jut out. You can see them from, a long way away. And so it's
Hmm.
definitely kind of intriguing that they would bring that medieval element into this, super modern building. You mentioned sort of like dreaming. So you have had you mentioned a couple of dreams in your book, and I've had similar sorts of dreams. But maybe just talk about uh, you mentioned one in particular about a boar, and why that was important to you, and why are dreams important?
That's a really good question. Yeah, there's some dreams in this book, and it's because I think I said the same thing last time. I think there are these you get glimpses of places in dreams and visions,
Yeah,
and my life has been a pilgrimage toward those sort of inner visions that I've had. I've tried to find those the equivalent of those things in the exterior world.
yeah,
And sometimes the most striking experiences would be when I would come upon a place and it would actually be like a place from a dream.
right,
And
yeah,
you would sense it, and it would be very strange
yeah,
because you'd never been there, but suddenly you'd sort of come upon something that would be like where the waking reality and the dream reality sort of converge. So I think dreams are like talismans, or they can
Mm.
be. You know, there's the Greek story of that there's a gate of horn and a gate of ivory, and there's one of them is the gate through which these kind of like meaningless dreams travel, and the other one is the one through which prophetic dreams come.
Right. Yeah.
And those prophetic dreams are like their inner talismans and treasures.
Yeah.
I find them very rare. And
Mm.
so when I get them, I really keep them. And sometimes I include them in, for instance, there's a lot of dreams in Holy Europe. Well, not a lot, but there's, you know, a significant number because there's these moments where they do tell you something very important, or they show you the way.
Yeah.
You know, you see the correct path in a dream. And so, yeah, they're very important for this reason. And
Yeah.
of course, what was a specific one you mentioned?
The one about the boar connected to Frey.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is one of those examples. I think I write about this in both of my English language books now, both in Journeys in the Kali Yuga and Holy Europe. I retell this story of being in a very desolate sort of life situation, kind of
Yeah.
a dark night of the soul,
Yeah.
and then having this dream of a god
Yeah.
of a certain with certain exterior sort of attributes, and then waking up and not having any knowledge of what this was, and then finding out upon awakening, and it seemed like it is that personality reaching out to you,
Mm.
and then that radically altered, my life course and sort of saved me. So I think we have these moments of when something or someone or something more touches us or guides us, whether that is the
Yeah.
Vylia, as I think you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
which is this kind of the daimon, the
Right.
the the guardian spirit, in lack of a better word, or whether it's some divine manifestation or something like that. But I
Yeah.
do think that this is, of course, I mean, not any kind of new idea. The whole history of religion is really, it's full of this, where dreams, point the way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And obviously you have, religious figures having dreams and people having conversions, which I think sort of happened to you. But with dreams, but you also have, even Salvador Dali would have cultivated this whole, um, a series of steps where he would enter sort of self-hypnosis and try and cultivate sleep and dreams. And then even, someone who's really, modern and interesting, Karl Lagerfeld, a fashion designer, said he dreamed one of his fashion collections and just got up and drew it and drew down what he saw and then created it. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Make strong old dreams, lest the world lose heart. This is what Ezra Pound
Oh,
said.
is that
So,
right?
yeah, I think that's uh,
That's interesting.
that's what
Yeah.
we should do.
Yeah, I think not to go off on a tangent, but obviously we're constantly consuming material and media today, especially through cell phones. And I think once you keep consuming this stuff, that nothing is able to come out, or it just comes out as garbled. So I wonder if that's contributing to maybe a lack of imagination or even, decline in religious or spiritual feeling as well.
Well, sure. I mean, for sure, because we're living in this completely novel time where people are exposed to so much
Yeah,
information of a dramatic nature constantly.
yeah, yeah,
There would be these times back in I was a kid in the 80s. So like that was a different time where
yeah,
you'd see like some graphic or like upsetting thing like once, a year or
yeah,
something. But now it's like we are constantly bombarded with like the drama of uh, of
yeah.
human life,
That's right.
both in its like sublime and really lowly, maybe even
Yes.
more the really lowly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And
That's
that's
right.
it's a mental like onslaught,
It is. Yeah.
and none of us are like, I can't say that I'm immune to it in any way,
Right. Yeah, it's difficult to be immune. Yeah, I think the other aspect as well, of course, is that, we can have anything we want or get anything we want almost automatically, and sometimes, really instantly. But the one thing that we are denied by doing this or having this option is we're denied anticipation. And, that's often better than getting the thing itself. I mean, I'm sure, growing up in the 80s, you would recall, having to wait months for a book or a record or something, and it really, really meant something. Whereas now you can just get this stuff so instantly that it just becomes just more stuff. There's nothing sort of special about it, let alone sacred, sacred,
Yeah.
And especially ancient people. Well, not even ancient people, but people up until a few decades ago, that would look forward to seasonal religious festivals and plan months in advance, for Christmas or Yule or whatever it was. And the one thing about this sort of addiction, we're not really fortified by having to wait at all. And yeah, it's a maybe it's not nice to wait months for one nice thing, but it sort of helps you, I think, as a human being to sort of fortify your spirit, and looking forward to it is often, as I say, often uh, at least a pleasure in itself, if not the best part. So
No, it's true. And there's a magic to these things back in the day when you had to really like,
yeah, that's right.
as you said, you had to wait and look for something, and
Yeah,
then and also like the chance finding,
yeah,
in just like, for instance, like some random bookstore, you'd find some like some treasure,
yeah,
and and just the excitement of finding some item or getting some random thing.
yeah,
There's a magic to it that is lost when everything is available and everything is free, and kind of everything loses its meaning, really.
yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah,
so I did want to, like I tried to make Holy Europe that it would be a little bit of a talisman. Like I put so much into it, like 10 years of sort of about a decade of life and things. And I remember like doing it and asking a few friends, like, do you think this is pretty private kind of thing? Should I put this in here? And I remember this one guy, my friend, who just said, yeah, just put everything in there. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good advice. Just put everything in there. So I kind of tried to, in an abbreviated sense, put a
yeah,
lot of things in there
yeah,
to and just thinking that they're trying to like make this kind of talisman of it, of it. And
yeah,
the first version that came out like is this one is the Finnish version, and this one came in I think December 20 or 21, and then now finally the English version is
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And but
And
yeah,
what
yeah.
Sorry, and what is the symbol on the cover? Because it looks a little bit like the photograph on the cover of the English version.
So this, you mean this symbol?
Yeah,
Well, this is the sun wheel, and or a sun cross.
yeah,
It's one of the oldest uh, symbols of humankind.
yeah.
And really, it's a central theme in the book is the sun wheel.
Mm,
Because it does express something very central to the book, which
mm,
is the convergence of the horizontal and the vertical, and the male and the female, and also paganism and Christianity.
mm.
And they're both sort of united in this symbol,
Right,
and in the idea that there is the vertical and the horizontal, and they're combined in this cyclical unity. I mean, really, if you
right.
look at a religious symbol for a pre-Christian spiritual tradition, uh, I can't really think of much that could be more sort of trying to sort of express in a visual, simple sense that simplicity, sort of
Yeah,
simple but sort of multifaceted idea that
yeah,
I'm trying to bring across, because I think it unites. I think the what I'm trying to do in the book is unite a lot of these maybe things that people think are disparate, which maybe aren't
yeah.
disparate. So it's convergence, of the
Right.
past and the future,
Mm.
of the pagan and the Christian, of the archaic and the modern and the futuristic. And so it's
Yeah,
trying to sort of bring these things into the same sphere
right.
of reality.
Yeah, and I think we have similar interests, maybe from different angles. And I'm interested in, well, I guess you are as well, but one of the things that interests me is how things continue. So, the way language changes over millennia. And in effect, we are speaking an ancient language that's just evolved, and a lot of the assumptions are sort of buried in our modern words, or our tradition of food goes back, you know, many, many hundreds of years, and the philosophy underpinning it goes back about 2,500 years. But but it seems like you're trying to sort of go back through that and then uncover the sort of roots of everything.
Yeah, yeah, I think something like that. And with my own, I think there's in these there, as I said, I think that the pagan sensibility is about s- sort of perceiving the eternal in those traditions, not necessarily the historical or time-bound
Right.
manifestations of those things, but the eternal things in those things.
Yeah.
Now, delving into my own tradition of the Finnic, uh, a central thing in this is the spoken oral lore
Yeah.
and poetry and
Right.
songs. So this is like this Kalevala meter of style of singing and reciting this poetry and spells.
Yeah.
And this goes back thousands of years, these melodies and these stories.
Yeah.
And then these stories are manifested like, or these myths or themes are manifested in different different kind of variants and
Yeah.
uh, reinterpretations of those things. And then you come to it and you look at it, and then you realize like what the central significance of this thing is.
Right.
And there is some strange power when you sing songs that you are really singing the oldest stories that there are,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in these melodies and in this way, which it has been sung for as long as you know people have been singing, probably. So
Yeah.
there's a power to it, and it's
For
definitely
sure.
not like something of the past, but
Yeah.
something of the eternal now. When
Yeah.
you go and you sing these things,
Right.
they sort of
Right.
become a reality, and it's no longer about just the meaning of the words, but the
Yeah.
sound, and the sound which conveys something which is beyond the just the verbal.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So we should probably touch on what is the largest aspect of the book, at least maybe not largest, but sort of most obvious aspect of the book, and that is you were traveling around Europe, really entirely across Europe, all the way to Iceland, and looking at different ancient sacred sites and meeting lots of curious character, drinking lots of wine by the sounds of things, and and you don't stick entirely to ancient paganism. I noticed that you mentioned a lot of different sort of modern esoteric traditions like Rosicrucianism as well, and all these sort of curious characters that pop up through history. So how does that all connect?
Well, I mean, it's all in the landscape of Holy Europe,
Yeah,
because the way that a lot of these ancient traditions have remanifested into Europe have been through these esoteric movements,
right.
especially
Yeah,
during the Rosicrucians and all these
yeah,
people, and then the artists who were inspired by those movements or involved in those movements. And really, like many of these things, probably like Art Deco that we talked about earlier, wouldn't be
yeah,
if there hadn't been the the artistic directions before that were brewed in this kettle of these esoteric currents.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it is really it's these things that are hidden become manifested in the culture through these various individuals, and how they sort of take form into the culture and shape history, really.
yeah,
And I mean, I was recently part of this Finnish film. That was a documentary about the late, what is it, late 19th century, early 20th century artists. Uh, and I mean, these were like not unknown artists, but really like the most famous artists that, that are literally printed on money these days, like Jean Sibelius, the composer,
Yeah.
and people like that. And how all of these people in Finland were inspired by esoteric things. And so it
Right.
was a history of the esoteric in Finland. Uh, but then when I looked at it and I realized this isn't really a history of the esoteric in Finland. This is a history of Finland. But it's because it's
Right. Yeah.
such a strong part of it
Yeah.
that these people who have been able to perceive and give voice and give form to some spirit, um, they have really been of massive, cultural significance.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
right.
is like both positive, of course, and negative. I mean, I
Yeah.
speak of a lot of different movements and artists and phenomena throughout Europe, which the reverberations of these things can still be sensed. So, I mean, this is really because these things shape the world and have shaped the Europe that we live in now. I mean, both
Yeah.
us as a people and the cultures and
Right.
the sort of land that we find ourselves right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
And
thinking of
and the
it.
wine thing, I mean, the I have a like it's not just let's get fucked up. It's not Hunter S. Thompson.
Right.
I think like for instance the wine thing, Roger Scruton, the British philosopher, he's
Hmm.
talking about how you can there's virtuous drinking and how you can sort of be in touch with the land, the
Yeah.
terroir, and you're
Yeah.
you're having a relationship with not just some material thing, but some immaterial thing through the wine. Like
Yeah.
you're partaking in sort of a communion of man and nature and
That's right.
art and cultivation and
Yeah.
history and
Yeah.
and all these things. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think imbibing and raising toasts and giving sacrifice of
Mm.
sacred spirits and drinks, I mean, that's an essential part of European
Right.
spiritual tradition. In all of the pagan traditions, you have sacred beer,
Yeah, of
sacred
course.
mead, sacred wine. It's
Yeah.
always this symbol of life force,
Yeah.
of this, like, the essence, the semen virile, like
Yeah. And
that,
sometimes
that,
poetry.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that has certainly, is part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. G.K. Chesterton, the Catholic author, said that a beer and the Bible were two noble things that were made even more noble by being put together. Yeah.
I mean,
So,
he's a strange guy. I kind of,
yeah.
I think I quote him in the book, and yeah, even though he was a Christian, I do kind of
Yeah.
like and agree with a lot of what he says about things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he wrote an essay called "The New Pagans." You probably read it, where I mean, he did not like paganism, and he thought everyone should be a Catholic. But his argument was that, well, Catholicism goes back to ancient paganism. So if you're celebrating Christmas and eating, sausages at Christmas or whatever, then you're doing something that's actually in a real historical lineage going back to pagan tradition. But he wasn't entirely wrong, really. So,
No,
yeah,
no, I mean there's a truth to that. Like
yeah,
you can certainly sense something when if you partake in these old Christian traditions,
yeah,
because these it wasn't just like the Christianity came and took over and slaughtered all the pagans. It was a
right.
long process
Yeah,
of also like synthesis because the Christians realized that the strategy to get people on board is to take the dates of the sacred year and
yeah,
adopt those to the Christian calendar and make
yeah,
them holy and go to the places that were holy and build your churches there
yeah,
and look at the ways that this is all documented, how Christianity sort of became uh, influenced by paganism in this way and how these
yeah,
things got synthesized. In
yeah,
Finland,
that's
these
right.
traditions, lived alongside one another for a long time. It took a
Yeah,
long time for Christianity to get the upper hand. And
Right.
even during uh, uh, Christianity's reign, there was periods of re-paganization where people just converted back. There was the so-called Second Crusade that Sweden conducted to Finland, and that was
Mm.
like to re-Christianize all the pagan Finns. And then when they
Mm.
left, the Finns all ran into this lake, which is now a few hours from where I live, and it's called the Regret Lake. So people went to wash off the baptism, in this lake of regret,
Boy.
that is
Wow.
now. So,
Wow.
so yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that these traditions have always, or for a long time, they've coexisted. So you can surely sense some things, in these old, and also also the style of the places where these churches are built, and the way that they've built often preserves something of a very pagan nature. Like when here, if you go
Yeah.
to some really old medieval church, I mean, it is powerful, and there is something like it's not arbitrarily chosen locations, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I still don't. The problem is that the Holy Land of Christianity is not in Europe,
Right.
and I think that's one of the fundamental issues. It's although Christianity has become European and almost a synonym for European,
Yeah.
it's not fundamentally from or of Europe. Its
Right.
origin is elsewhere. Its Holy Land
Hmm.
is still elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we can orient ourselves uh, healthily in the world if our sacred land is somewhere beyond our own land. I mean, we have
Yeah.
to have our spiritual light has to come from our own land, from our own
Mm.
sacred
Yeah. And
place.
is that a sense of worshiping it or having a connection to it?
I don't think you need to. I mean, it is an orientation. I
Right.
think you don't need to worship
Right.
it in the sense, but I think it's where you're oriented.
Yeah.
What is your center?
Yeah.
And I think there is a connection with, as we talked earlier, between dreams and waking reality, and between internal and external places. And I
Right.
think for Europeans to have a sense of home, they have to have a sense of rootedness
Yeah.
and a connection with where they are from and where they sort of belong.
Right.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I noticed there's a theme of home and homesickness running
Hmm.
throughout almost everything I do.
Right.
And I was actually horrified by how I just realized I'm kind of a romantic, like in this old sense, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
a lot. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I just realized, oh God, like I was looking
Yeah.
at some Caspar David Friedrich art or something. And I was like,
Right.
oh man, like there's a lot of points where I can see eye to eye with the romantic movements of the
Yeah.
past, like this sense of like not being, maybe you're looking for something that doesn't even exist in the
Right.
world, that the external world is fundamentally um, not what it could be or should be. And there's
Yeah.
this ultimate sense of longing, that can maybe never be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And even this Holy Europe, it's like some when it was released in Finnish, there was some. I mean, mostly the critique was very good, but there was some critique was like he doesn't define the borders of Europe or something. It's like I'm obviously not describing just a physical area. It's
Yeah.
a dream, you
Right.
know. Holy Europe is a dream. It's like a collection of things, and it's a vision, and it's a vision
Yeah.
of what could be. It's not a political project, in the sense of like, so where do you draw the line of Europe? It's like that's not the uh, central thing behind it.
Yeah. This makes me think of something that I experience pretty regularly, and and I have to say, I've studied lots of different religions, and I'm more sympathetic to Hinduism than many, and uh, yeah, I'm sort of skeptical of modern paganism as well. But when I meditate often, if meditate's the right word, I'll often. enter a state of hypnagogia and have these very brief dreams of sort of landscapes that are, green hills or a well, or often castles as well. And it's so, and you could say that's because, I grew up in England, and it's obviously, you know, partly that, but it's something that's deeply embedded in my consciousness as well. Because I'm certainly not trying to think of these things or dream of these things, and whenever I try to dream of something, that doesn't actually work. So yeah, so that kind of provokes the question of do we need some sort of connection to the landscape to dream, at least to dream dreams that are in some way, you know, healthy, or make us feel fulfilled, or are more artistic or more creative or whatever it may be, and to actually sort of live a way that's actually creative. Uh,
Are you asking, do we need a physical connection, a
yes,
proximity like to these places to dream of
yeah,
them?
yeah, or at
I
least
don't
at
think
some
so.
point, yeah,
I think it's like, I don't think we're tabula rasa as human beings. I don't
right,
think we're born as blank slates,
for sure,
and it's just like our dreams are just rehashing our impressions
yeah,
and things. I That's kind of a lot, or in parts, I talk about having memories or visions of things I've never experienced
right,
or
yeah,
seen.
yeah,
And then that's when you have these experiences when these things converge, and oh, I this
yeah,
is what I've experienced in the past, but I've never been here.
yeah,
And so I think there's we are like, we inherit both physical and internal landscapes.
yeah,
There's like, we are born with a well of memory
yeah,
of our ancestors in us. That's why
right,
we can know things and sense things.
right,
There's many instances where I describe in this book where I would sort of stumble into things just by following some sort of strange instinct or intuition, and I'd
yeah,
find some holy place just
yeah,
kind of like accidentally.
yeah,
But I don't think it's accidental, because I think
mm,
I'm going to the same places as someone else, or my ancestors would have gone to. There's this kind of like
right,
orientation.
yeah,
And so I don't think you necessarily need physical proximity to those things to have them in you.
yeah,
But I
hmm,
think there's like a sense of home comes from having the internal and the external
hmm,
align.
right,
When our sort of
sure,
internal and external realities align in some
yeah,
deeper sense, that's when you have a sense of home. It's not
yeah,
just like a place, it's not the exterior. And this is
yeah,
what people are like, this is the thing. It's hard to find home. It's like, if you only think it's going to be a place, it's not going to be a place. It's going to be a place where you feel a certain, there's like there's a correlation with the internal with the external.
yeah,
And I think this is also what we need, as I say, I mean Europeans need on a collective level. We have to have a sense of both our inner and outer landscapes sort of correlate,
mm,
or our sacred land needs to. We need to rediscover what that means.
yeah. So I think, some people would probably say that this seems a bit fantastical, but, even from, evolutionary studies of, studies of nature, obviously, even, animals like an otter knows how to build a dam and knows that it should build a dam when, actually no other otter taught it how to do that. And pretty much, all the animals that, know how to behave straight away. They are born with some kind of, innate, you know, uh, memory, which goes back, millions of years in some cases.
Yeah,
Yeah,
isn't this like, I don't think I need to like start proving these ideas with like biology or something, but
yeah.
isn't there like this whole genetic memory thing where you have it's been proven that there are memories that are genetically transmitted.
There may
And
there may
also,
be I can't remember the species of bird, but I do remember it's quite some years ago there was a test where they created this sort of historical opponent of one species of bird, and that had long died out, and they sort of hung it up and made it move, and all the birds attacked it, and they seem to have this innate memory that this was actually their enemy,
Right.
but they'd never seen it, and they weren't attacking other birds or anything. So it's intriguing. It definitely
No, yeah,
suggests there's an innate memory.
right. Yeah, and like a spider will build the perfect
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
net, and it's like
yeah,
I think we also as humans we are sort of we have things that we're supposed to be doing innately,
for sure.
but
Yeah,
it's the modern Weisenheimer, person that thinks that they all of the knowledge of previous generations into like immemorial memory really are like outdated, and he's so much smarter with his smartphone and
yeah,
modern technology as those like stone
yeah,
age cavemen from like the past 50 years,
y
50 years earlier.
yeah,
It's hubris, and it's incredibly dangerous, and
yeah,
disrespectful, and yeah, it's just all the whole modern the modern uh, sort of redefining or breaking every possible tradition or
yeah,
knowledge or wisdom of the past,
yeah.
and then replacing it with what?
Yeah.
Mostly it's consumerism or consumerist identities.
That's right. Yeah, that as a sort of analogy, in America in particular, every 10 years it seems there's some new food fad where you try and extract the essence of some plant or something, and then you just take its essence and or you eat only egg whites for breakfast and not the yolk, because that's just terrible. But it turns out it's always better to eat the whole plant or the whole egg. Maybe there are exceptions for some people that have some strange diet requirements, but for most people, eating the whole plant you get is what enables usually the essence to be absorbed, because the whole thing is working together.
That's
Yeah,
really true. It's a very American phenomenon, that with the making the
yeah,
diet your
yeah,
identity. So like
yeah.
you are what you eat, and you have to tell everybody what you're eating. It's like, how is that? But that's just that's consumerism,
Yeah, for
in a way that
sure.
you are defined by the things that you consume, and somehow
Yes.
that shapes your inner reality or something, and then you need to tell everybody about it all the time.
Yeah, right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah,
And
and
it's incredibly superficial.
yeah, it is. And obviously that's the case with food, but it's also the case with everything, right? And maybe most especially politics. What politics are you consuming? And then that tells people whether you're a good person or a bad person or an intelligent person or a stupid person. But
Yeah.
but no, not really. So
Yeah, I mean there are political dimensions for sure with this book that you can't really avoid it. I would be really disingenuous if I would be like, there's no political dimension to it. Obviously, there are, we live in the real world where politics and things play a part, but that's not really what my focus is on these things. And
right,
I am seeking the transcendent reality,
right.
which is
Yeah,
higher than politics, which I
for
think
sure.
it has the possibility to unite people
Yeah,
or uplift them where they can see beyond
yeah,
the political.
that's
Like
right.
that there is a spiritual, I mean, spiritual tradition, and that's why I speak of the holy, because it is this sphere which is above politics,
Yeah,
and it is above these. Their politics are always time bound and
yeah,
sort of concerned with the profane.
yeah,
But this is not. It's not my focus, and I'm not I'm not some party line guy. So
yeah.
I'm not coming with like a strict political message here.
Right.
But of course,
Sure.
I'm
No, I don't get that.
commenting on
Yeah.
um, the reality of situations in Europe, which
Yeah,
I
sure.
think as an author you have to be honest
Yeah,
and
you do.
tell things as you see them.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right. Yeah, I didn't, I mean, I didn't get a sense that it was overly political. I haven't read every single page, so maybe I missed something, but it didn't seem to be focused on the political at all. But yeah, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the transcendent bringing people together, even beyond the borders of Europe. I think, what people today who are very well intentioned feel that we can be brought together through politics, and that usually means finding a common enemy, and then we can hate that enemy, and we will all love each other, even though we have nothing nothing in common. But when you look back at sort of ancient tradition, obviously there are things that and ideas and beliefs and a sort of attitude that would probably connect every culture if we went back to the roots of all of them, Hinduism, European, Middle Eastern, whatever have you, African. But I mean, in some cases, there are also actually sort of historical connections, so, you know, uh, Muslim theologians or Muslim mystics were influenced by Plato and Aristotle as well. That Middle Eastern food was influenced by ancient Greek medicine, just as Western European food was as well. So I think we kind of lose a lot when we, focus on the political and the modern and don't look back to our ancient past. And I think maybe one of the great ironies is that, the people feel that if we get rid of our culture, we'll have more in common somehow with other cultures. But actually, it's the opposite is the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I write in this book is that you need to rediscover this what you love. And I mean, this is a
Right.
huge, I mean, I say, I don't know if you read the end of the book, but I do describe this book as a love letter, you know, to something that could be.
Yeah.
It is an expression of love, this book.
Right.
I'm for something.
Right.
And I think it's very, very important to be for something instead of
Yeah.
being against something or just reacting against things and situations.
Yeah,
I find
definitely.
the orientation that I see a lot of people are very frustrated
Yeah.
with aspects of the modern world,
Yeah.
and they focus almost solely on things that they hate.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
there's things that are bad, and then there's things that are horribly wrong and unjust in the world. And it's justified to have anger about cruelty and things that are unjust in the world. But you should focus also like on what you are for and what you want and what you love.
Yeah.
Unless because people then get a little. I think it's very unhealthy to get just focused on the adversary, the perceived
Yeah, for
enemy.
sure. Yeah.
And I think it's a manifestation of messianism also.
It is.
And it's an like Abrahamic impulse because it again we talked about just before we started recording, we talked about these current political situations.
Yeah.
Without going into these things, I think people's hopes and fears are these strangely messianic, where people will think uh,
Yeah.
this is the antichrist of some political leader, and the
Yeah.
other half will think this is Christ. And
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
right.
either is the case. And I don't think
No.
politicians are the spiritual leaders that we should look. They're politicians, they're businessmen, they're people who are good at talking to the public, but they're not in it for, they're not the spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
And I think that people project these things onto them, whether it's these uh, irrational fears or irrational hopes. I think is illusory, but it does speak of people's need to have some somebody or something to look up to. You know.
Yeah, definitely. So where can people get hold of Holy Europe or
Uh,
find out more about you as well?
yeah, Holy Europe is published by Arcana Europa, and you can get it through Amazon. And yeah, it should be available everywhere. Yeah. You can follow me on akicederberg.com or on Instagram or Facebook. I have these author pages, so you can follow what I'm doing there.
Great. Awesome. Right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, great to talk to you again.